Good evening, everyone. We're getting ready to go into week 6, and I'm on Sunday afternoon. We're about at the halfway point next week, so you're doing great. Just keep up the hard work. I know it's been a little hot the last couple days, but I'm hoping the forecast for rain next week comes true. We can all use a little bit of cool weather right now. But anyway, I wanted to go through a short deal as far as what's going on next week for you, and try to keep you on track, keep you working hard, and hope you're having fun. I know some of you are already starting to try to make sure. Yep, we are taping. Some of you have already started your observation, so keep up the good work. Don't hesitate if you are uncertain about any part of anything of the observation report. Get with me first. I'll be glad to give you a call if we can't talk about it over email or if we're still having concerns, but I'd much rather spend 15 minutes or so explaining it to you so you know exactly what you need to have for me than for you to turn in the observation report for me to email you back saying we need more information, because at that point in time it's very difficult to do that this late in the season. Most of the schools you're looking right now, it's the 17th, so probably about halfway through their summer school, so you don't have much time left. So if you have not, I know there's about 3 or 4 of you that have not emailed me exactly who you are observing, emails, and the buildings you'll be in, and whether they're regular ed or special education teachers. Make sure and do that. If you are looking on your grades and you still do not have a full 10 points for your observation post, then you're one of the ones that I still need some information from. So get with me as soon as you know that so I can up that grade and make sure that I've got everything I need. Let's go ahead and review the week. Looks like you continue to do great. Right now the average on the quizzes I have is a 9, and the lowest is an 8 and the high is a 10. So keep up the great work. I think at this point there's only 2 people that have not done that yet, so hopefully by the time they read this Monday morning they'll have taken it already, and we can keep that grade up. Let's see here. At this time also, it looks to me like the grade for the class is still, the average is an 88. You're going higher, so keep up the great work. I know you all are working hard. I know several of you have jobs you're trying to get everything worked in. Some of you have more than my class this summer, and so make sure and keep up the hard work of keeping on track. I do want to add some thoughts here about RTI. I've looked at a few. I'm going to look tomorrow morning at the rest of them. But let me tell you what's expected. Many times, this is where I hear some grumblings from teachers when asked about data. But at RTI, this is where the work comes in. It's all about the data. You'll be asked to keep that data. If you have a student that is not doing well, not up to par, you'll take it to a team, maybe called a care team or some other name, but you'll take it to a team of what your school considers their experts. There will probably be at least one special education teacher in that team that has some ideas about what, but you'll go there and they will give you some strategies, and then they'll say come back in 3 or 4 or maybe 4 to 6 weeks with some data on how that student is doing. And if there is an increase, then you'll keep going. That's exactly what RTI is all about, is finding out how to teach to each individual student and to help them succeed. So if they aren't succeeding, they'll look at Tier 2, where they get more attention and focus on the area of need to your classes. This is to help him or her succeed, and to see if this helps. If it does, then the student will be placed back in your classroom. That's what RTI is all about. If you get it figured out, what strategy you need to do to get the student to do what you want, and they start doing well, then they're in your classroom. If they don't, then they'll move on to Tier 3, and this is where, and I guess I should go back, many times they will go, repeat Tier 2 again. It's not like you just get one chance to prove yourself, that the student's doing well, there may be a couple trials where you will go back and try a different strategy to get that student to do what you need to do. But if those don't work, then Tier 3 many times is that special education section. Some schools would test the students at this point to get to just get the cognitive scores, the academic scores, and make sure that everything is where they need them there, and maybe get some more information that they're not sure about. But part of this is working on strategies. It can take some time to get that special education student into special education, even though what many schools are using now, what many people might call the wait to fail approach. It does take some time. RTI can take some time too, while you're changing strategies and trying to find out what works. That's what it's all about. The other thing I wanted to mention is a special education teacher or coordinator will typically be in these teams to help with ideas on strategy. This is where parents and teachers still need to understand the process. As a PC, I had some incidences. Glad there were few, and I know I'm reading, but I want to make sure I touch everything here. Where I would find out that, in fact, a parent requested their son or daughter to be tested. Once a teacher hears these words, you must tell your special education, if you have a coordinator, principal, whatever, that takes care of the special education, that is when you must let them know. This is when, if a parent comes to, a lot of times I had parent-teacher conferences, and this was a dread for me because it would come up about 2 or 3 weeks later. I get a phone call from a teacher, or a teacher would drop by and say, yeah, parent-teacher conferences, this parent came by and they were concerned, and they mentioned that they would like to get their student tested. And I would, that's when you take a deep breath as a process coordinator or somebody in special education, because you have just lost 2 weeks out of your 30-day timeline. Once that parent comes to you as a teacher or a counselor and says those words, I would like to have my student tested, or something about special education, you need to get somebody right away. Do not wait a day, 2, 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever it may be. You let them know then, because that is when your timeline starts, and you have 30 days to get that meeting put together, to get all the scores and all the data that's back in the files on that student together, to have a meeting to see if you think as a team they might qualify for testing for special education. So I just wanted to bring that up here. It's happened. Luckily, not too many times, but it does happen. Whether it's first day of school or last day of school, the school then has a responsibility to have a meeting to discuss special education needs of that student. There are times that I've had a parent contact me with a few weeks left of school about their student wanting, about special education. And that's when that timeline starts. Whether you've got 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that timeline starts. And so you must hopefully be talking about some of these students, before that end of the year comes in, or Christmas break. Because at what time I was there, Christmas break, those days counted still. There was a time when they didn't. The state was, oh, you're off on Christmas break. No worries, we won't count those days. But when I was there, yes, they changed it back, and you had to count those days, whether you were out of school or not. You had to count those days. So make sure and let people know. And the school, let's see, it doesn't mean testing. It means to collect the data and look over the data. So education, what RTI is and how it works, is very important during this time of Tier 2 and 3. All of you will be affected in some way by RTI, and all of your students will be also, whether it's in better instruction for you as a teacher or the student, along with many other ways. Last time I want to discuss is the feeling when I read through some of the posts, about special education. I don't know how many times when walking the halls of school I had a teacher stop me and start to discuss a student they just knew was one of mine, just because the student had ADHD, autism, or any behavior they expected me to know. But in many cases, I would have to tell them, I'm sorry, but I don't recall that name. And they weren't in special education. So I'll let you ponder that question a little bit about looking for students that you think are special education and automatically just assuming. I'll get back to that towards the end of this video. But let's get on to this week's items. Here, let me go ahead and click on that. This week, you'll be looking at what I would consider one of the more difficult categories of emotional and behavioral disorders, Chapter 6. When you think about the terminology used for this category, many people get differing views of who the students might be. You see the term emotional, and most people think about students with intense feelings. And then, times of bad, and then you see the term behavioral, which then, of course, gives you feelings of, maybe the student has intense feelings and, maybe some bad behaviors along with that, which is exactly what they mean. However, in this category, your students will be the same in many ways, but also very different. Trust me. This was what I did for the first year, and thereafter I still had many students that were in this category. These students are not quick to let outsiders into their bubble or space. I know that we as teachers expect many students to respect us and expect them to listen to us, but many times this can get a new teacher into trouble very quickly. I'll explain more after you've dove into the chapter, and also make sure you read the article about Michelle Nielsen Pugmire from Farmington, Utah. But don't forget to learn about how the definition can be vague, what is what it is and what it's not. Externalizing and internalizing of behaviors is also another key point you want to make sure and watch. The potential for academic achievement. I had many students that were in this category that I know the book may say differently, but that were 130, 140 IQ, very smart kids, but yet they still are in this category. And also, how prevalent this group of students can be, or maybe we should say should be. I'll let you ponder that as you go through the chapter. The many causes, there's 5 dimensions of behavior. There's a functional analysis part where you try to find out, very similar to what you might do with autism, why something's happening. Different educational approaches, the school-wide behavioral support. I mean, there are tons of ideas that people have used for this category, so you need to really look and watch what you read and really think about what you're reading and maybe put it into perspective by, thinking about students and what you would do in a certain situation. But one of the things that I think I learned really, I wish I had learned it quickly, but I did learn it very quickly anyway, but what you need to gain is these students' trust. Once you earn their trust, then you can really dig deeper into them and why they're feeling that way and really get their respect at that point. I mean, for these kiddos, they're tough kids. And you need to gain that trust in order to gain that respect. So that's why I'm saying some first teachers that may think, they need to respect me right away. Well, yes, they maybe do, but you're looking at a different type of student when you're looking at the student that has emotional and behavioral disorders. And many times I still think about some of these students that I had. And it's been many years since I had them. But they will be the ones that tug at your heartstrings because you will work with them so hard and try to get them to turn around and to listen and do. And you'll realize how smart these kids really are the more you work with them. So again, as you're reading through this chapter, think about what you're reading about. And then you'll also have to realize, in the toughest part, how many of these students can and will be in the juvenile system. I know there used to be a video that I would show that really brought it to heart, but I know when I taught EBD students, unfortunately it was not uncommon for me to eventually find them in the police report. I don't know how many kids I could count Probably would take more than two hands that ended up in the juvenile system, even though I know we worked as hard as we could to turn them around. But you've got to keep going with these kids. Don't let them down. Don't just forget about them. They're very smart kids, and a lot of these kids are very hands-on and can do great work if we can find the right career or technical school or trade school that can push them in the right direction and get their energies out like that. I'll let you get to the rest of the chapter. I'm not going to go too much more into that. I could. It's one of the chapters that I really feel strongly on. So let's go on. Discussion board. Really, all you have this week is discussion board and quiz. So you'll need to go ahead and try to get things done. Let's see, I'm going to jump in. Once I get this done, I'm going to jump in and actually pull the discussion board up at that point in time on that one there. But basically, the quiz and discussion board is all you have this week. The following week, you have autism, so no biggie there. I do want to go in as an ending comment before we look at the discussion board. To answer the question about the student that wasn't mine, just because a student has a diagnosis from a doctor, whether it be whatever it might be, but I have allergies and I have hearing aids, and that doesn't mean I'm special education for those. What the teachers aren't seeing, or what you need to remember, is that they need to have that educational need. Some students will get C's. Just because they get that particular grade doesn't mean that they need special education. The student must have that educational need to receive services from special education. You will see that in every single one of what we're looking at, except one, and I'll get to that one later on. But most likely, they need to have that educational need. Anyway, I had a student that had an educational or a special diagnosis of autism from a doctor. And the student came to high school, and I had a teacher ask about him. I honestly didn't know the person's name. I went ahead. I said, well, I will look just to make sure. I was at that point panicking a little bit just because, well, okay, maybe did we miss somebody? And so I went and I looked through the student's files, and lo and behold, no, he was not a special education student. They were a student with autism. And so I told him, I said, I'm sorry. Went back to the teacher later on. I told him, I said, I'm sorry, but no, this student has never had special education. So, if you are seeing some things that you think are signs that we need to look at, then let me know. But as of right now, he is not a student that needs to be seen by anybody. He doesn't have any records at all of special education. So we went with that. Well, about 3 weeks later, I got a call from a parent. And lo and behold, it was the parent of this student. And what they told me was exactly why I want you to understand that just because there is a diagnosis from a doctor does not mean there's special education. What this parent described to me is two parents that were very educated that helped this student work his way through lower grades, elementary grades, middle school, and they were doing fine. They didn't see a need for that student, for their son or daughter to have an IEP or to get that educational help. This child was very bright and had made it through fine. Well, come to find out, even though the parents were very, very educated and very smart, they just could not keep up with helping their student at that point in time, and they kind of felt like they had let their own son or daughter down. And I had to explain, don't worry about it. It's not anything you've done. I mean, I congratulated them for working with their son or daughter for this long and doing fine. But so we did open up a case. This student did have a diagnosis from a doctor with autism. So we opened up an evaluation, did some got everything in order for our initial meeting to decide if we wanted to test for a possible special education need. We got together, and the student had, in fact, had very good grades in the past. But now that they were getting into a situation with high school and higher level classes, higher level thinking, it was a little bit tough. And the student was not doing as well as what was to be expected. And with the autism diagnosis from outside and with some good data that we had collected, the team decided to test. And after we got the testing done, we put it all together, and sure enough, the team did feel that he or she made the eligibility for educational autism also. And so we went ahead and finished up that evaluation, and then within 30 days did the IEP, and the student did receive some help. Now, it was not a lot, but he or she needed this extra support due to the student's autism diagnosis to help them through. But again, just because they have an autism diagnosis, especially in ADHD, a lot of times that's where they would come in too. This is in fact where they would come in with a script from a doctor telling us that he or she needed an IEP. And that isn't how how it works, but the doctors seem to think so. I'm not sure why they think so. But anyway, I wanted to let you know, don't assume that just because you have a student that has a diagnosis on file that they're a special education student. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at. I wanted to make sure. I'm going to change screens real quick, so bear with me here. That one there, and I'm going to go to discussion board. Okay, this one here on Chapter 6 discussion. You're going to post your original response Monday through Thursday at noon. Post comments to 2 peers between Thursday afternoon and Sunday night. For your initial post, select one of the student examples below and then post your first hypothesis. Make sure you're reading all of the chapter. I would look on this Monday night, look in one of the 3 hypotheses to see which one you want to do, then go back in the book and see what you can do, what you would like to look at to give the hypothesis. These are examples of students with whom either myself or my cohorts have consulted through the years. So although I know what the data showed the function was, there really is not a right answer since I'm not going to give you all the information I had available. Just make a reasonable hypothesis, make sure and back it up, give it some good backup feedback from the chapter, and then discuss with 2 other students' hypothesis with them. So once you get done initially on Thursday with that needs to post it. I know I went ahead and upped it to took it back to Thursday, but I feel like this one here needs a little more thought from you. Okay, so there is a little video there, attention function and toddler tantrums. Go ahead and get a look at that. But anyway, make sure you get on there by Thursday and then come back and post to at least 2 of your peers on their hypothesis. That's why it's really critical that each of you get on here by Thursday afternoon, because if some of you don't, then that puts a hindrance on your peers at getting their assignment done on time. So anyway, that is the discussion board. Now I guess you have a great week and get to studying, and we'll talk to you next week. If you have any questions on anything, don't hesitate to email. I will be getting in my office in the morning, and we'll go ahead and grade the discussion boards for this week, and then look and see if I can finally grade a couple of the last week's papers. So anyway, great talking to you. Hope you had a good weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Have a great one.